So, since I'm scared of jokes or whatever, I have a fear of jokes. The uh, what is it? I used to watch a movie. Not a friend necessarily. I played poker with him a lot, and part of a, I don't know, question mark, but you always used to watch this. I kind of learned about people a lot from hanging around with them. But a friend of sorts, through different avenues of time, I guess. But it was interesting. I was in a speech class right across from Strike Music Center. Before I was just making like weird noises, clusters, and I gave a speech on time dilation for the hell of it, because I had a preposterous epiphany out here at Shelby Farms or whatever. Saw that guy again there just by random hat draw, and in hindsight, I don't think it was random hat that he was there at all. Part of long form time presentation, insofar as it's fucking probabilistically impossible, is that U of M class was selected from like Earth is seen from space, and this person is in there. So I don't know how that happened, but poker. You see all the music recorded it. It's only a couple of things, some overdubs, and I was donating plasma down there on Park for about 5 minutes, and did some full donation bleep bloop, right on all the way into the piano face, and play through like some very, very complex stuff, and you can hear that on something there, I think. Maybe it's Mumbles God of Music or not, but the sonic comes up. Anyway, so the rounders, giving at the store, the poker table. I always wanted to go there, right? The World Series of Poker, like me, right? Not just like the character of the movie, like I'm starting in on the dialogue at the beginning, or the monologue at the beginning or something. No, so like, and I think I want to come up with the premise again, independently of whatever it was, as I've forgotten it almost entirely at this point. So it had something to do with the Tyson Paul fight being in Vegas. And so that's happened, and it's like a Rorschach of riff that can be, callbacked on. Maybe in a year forward. Does that make sense? So think of Highlander, how it starts at a wrestling match, right? So that sort of thing, right? But not wrestling necessarily, right? But the what is it? So let's see. What would be the, so we start there. I think you figured out, okay, there's an off-strip club in the basement of some gas station, and that's their regular thing or something. Or is one of them, right? And, but there's the fight thing. And what was the context for the character's representation in Koleski? I think we're well enough on. Into them already being there, and yeah. But that's not necessarily where we want to go with it. You know, how can you dilate the time where at the end of the first one he doesn't necessarily even go? There's some hang up, right? That's hilarious. Like, so what is the end? Like, he just gets in a taxi and there's a monologue. Maybe he admits immediately that he's full of shit, right? And, you know, he doubles back. And that's what dilates the frame on this motherfucker never actually goes to Vegas, right? And, get it? Yeah. And so he gets stuck in that trap. Maybe, no, that's not, it's not really, because the other way was they're already there and time is on. You know, one or the other of them has, I think Mikey has won, and you know, there's been some sort of frog in boiling water, you know, administration of the parasymbiotic relationship of Edward Norton's character to Matt Damon's character somehow, right? Through some manner of which is beyond me to conscribe. It is in a notepad. I'm almost 100% positive. Well, yeah. Let's get into dark premonition, usual on Earth. Anyways, the theme is the fight is okay, that's better. We open on haste, right? You open on haste. Yeah? So, yeah, at the fight. Open at the fight, a cacophony, right? and burst in, out of the seam of light, is and looks like he's beaten to a pulp. No context for that, but trauma, light, fight, right? Bright, and concussed, wandering out into, and there's a fight in front of them. So, yeah, it's like a old friend callback. Yeah, it's a hangers on again. Yeah. So he swept. So that's how to do it, I guess. So you have both things. You have both kind of motions, because one is a platitude emotion, the other one like moves. And so this could be sequels, right? Part of that where it breaks off and it becomes sort of like transmutative and not require some of the context is everything, context moment to moment necessarily, because it's understood that you're staring at a river, right? And so the stories don't necessarily complete the arc, but it is completed psycho-emotionally, say. Does that make sense? So you're shifting dimension but not emotion, like a train track. And so Rounders 2, I mean, not necessarily, right? It's films that, like, it shouldn't necessarily exist, and that's kind of the thing. Get it? So, and a mini-series, right? With plain old and what is the Desire's design? It's it's the Transmuticon Ex Rigor Mortis. It's the book of death, of life, rather. Maybe of, and based on the movie, based on the film. And it's a mini-series now, on television series, whatever, And it is, it's just, it's moving along, regardless of, and in the, so like, what other films would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, probably. Rounders 2, and they're all kind of tongue-in-cheek, maybe mathematically. Rounders 2, right? Yeah. And then I was working on a Cabin Boy 2 spec script, right? Before the Dirty Work 2 script was decided on. I got all the way to, he had gotten to another planet, and David Letterman did the same thing where the monkey thing bit, and but he had it as a space helmet on it, the monkey. And that's kind of where it ended. So, That's as far as it went. And the let's see another one. It's films that it's not that they shouldn't necessarily be made. They they have no propensity necessarily for it to work. It's sort of like like a Joe Dirt 2 situation with most of them, more or less. I hate to shit on that movie, but so yeah, what would the other ones be? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And maybe so it's a book that is written as what is assumed to be a summary of Earth history content as is scavenged by alien archaeologists at some point in the future, right? Given, what is it? It's a film archive, maybe. And then these films in fragment are the ones that are, and then so it's been as best assembled as it can be or something. Some bullshit thing. Come on. Right? Some sort of vehicle. It's a sandwich, right? The film, right? You build it, you put, ask Esker Pravitsky about that, the sandwich thing, or Chinese, whatever. Anyways, so, let's see, what's in so Rounders 2 and so it's like a fluid dynamic jazz continuance from whatever it opened as to, like the alchemical process, rounders too, rounding up too, right? And then maybe transmute this to something else entirely. Don't even consider any of that. Remove all the faces, archetype, story, poker, fight. All we are is sitting right there. And a guy bursts into what is it? It's it's the fight, the same fight, yeah. And Let's see. Scrub all that. Right? There's too many harmonic connotations. So we open it's like a flat plane of glass, and the camera opens like this. Right? 21 by 9 expansion, right? And there's a white piano here, right? And you see some birds maybe fly off this way here. You see there's ocean, kind of at the flat horizon. There's a bit of branches. You can see we're up in the redwoods. It's a container. And something about travel, right? It's like a guy who he's got this kind of ritual gig where he has this little house there, and he skipjacks on this little fishing boat thing or whatever, and he does the loop back. It's a nice whatever. Maybe not a fishing boat, like a cargo jump thing where it's, like where a rider would like to sit in, back and forth between there and California is out, or in. That was the Mendocino sort of aesthetic of, it's like a sort of Paradise Lost thing. I'm reaching at it because it's like, well, it's not lost, it's like still there, but the aesthetic appeal of it, because there's no fucking Hollywood to speak of, and like its liability to even like exist in the state, right? So. For anyone, and 50% tax is just insane. So with that, so at the end of Project Green Glow, we're left with they're holding hands, and there's the alien aircraft there. I guess, because forward context has been applied, necessarily the story variation forward transmuted from the see, where could you go with that? Yes. So we go back to 918 China, mainland. Yeah, that's what happens. I get it. So they have a pattern flux interest on the Riemann zeros, and part of the grays, right? John's dealing with them, and 918 dropping in. You know, he's floating and catches a satellite down, you know, or whatever. And you know, I was like to wrap it up. You know, the backside of infinity being the literal physics of, you know, the suggested backside of infinity, which can be expressed within the narrative of another 101 pages. Why not? I think. So, the show must go on, like they say. So, let's see. Yep. That's what. So the first scene is and you see the gray craft there, you know, he's floating, weightless and starting to freeze, you know, Fellion's crawling on his shoulder, you know, across, and it goes gone from voidous space there almost, with the littered debris of satellites already? Not necessarily. What is this thing? And some sort of military something or other writing, seemingly, not having context for it necessarily. I don't think this is the best modus. This is where it kept, as he kept getting sucked into so at the end they're holding hands, and you know, the little CRT TV is right in between them in the distance. You know, the Delta Wing and the alien aircraft there. Well, not necessarily. And that's what alien intervention. This is the first slide that you see. So it's you know, and he's like sort of, kind of with the, you know, whatever apparatus he has there as described in the text so far. Fellion crawls on his shoulder, disappears, and time out of mind, Fellion more kind of tuned to the extremes one way or the other. more biomechanical now than a ferret could necessarily be said to be, but and slipping away, right? So there's that right at the beginning of the film, an immediate sort of, and then as the lights kind of go, it's like and there's this and so he dies, yeah. But not really, right? So he's so he's wearing a wristwatch, maybe, of some kind, as described. And this is our fulcrum for, narrative riff off of him fading out. You're getting a relative position for just the numbers passing, and then them redisplayed later. Him being in 918 approximately. And Earth, space-time, with future back reinforcing relevance to calendar date. And he wakes up, right? And Fellion's there on the kind of flat slab. I guess the aesthetic is more in the software of, I guess, the engineering of the hardware. Form field, kind of like, should maybe necessarily be discussed without the particulars. Like with the other thing, as it's a necessity of, but then they have their higher construct, and so that's maybe why it's not such a big deal for John D. Public, right, to know how to build a UFO as the transmutagenic parasymbiotic extraterrestrial thing. See the Borg in Star Trek. Now see Star Trek. Why do they always win against the Borg? Well, they're self-reflectively relevant and parasymbiotic. Their inherent nature is their downfall. So their technology doesn't necessarily increase as technology sort of affinity for interest, and thus knowledge use is so that they're kind of like an attention gravitation desire organism, all right? And but it's not really a good example for scalar comparative to the Star Trek Enterprise or something. The gray craft or whatever's over the lodge there. So that thing enters the frame quadratically, and condensed into the void space he's floating there. he's on board or whatever, and sort of like a Clockwork Orange sequence maybe occurs, where he's given or we are given through the, he's not brainwashed by them, but a the backside of infinity experientially, which later informs his, say, metaphysical allegory to condense, a literal geometric expression of, all, toe equation maybe at the end of the book, to literalize the flow of 1, 2, 3, everything within the narrative, and kind of point to space in that way. Put it on a coffee table, the problems and the solutions. It's something, you kick your feet up by it. It kind of makes it a little bit more comfortable, right? In a narrative form. So it's him coming back to that we're filled in the gaps of not the backside of infinity of, the death experience near, but more so the flash of, what up into the wall of time as it is history and memory, and the gaps where, maybe that recontextualize archetypes that were duplicitous and, protagonist in nature, but in hindsight not necessarily. And so this sort of prismatic, triangular, more quadratic in formulation, kind of fused, fixed, hovering off the coast. There's rocky shoal over here, looks nice. This container perched between two redwoods, and kind of like very placidly aquiline and aerobically whatever, but not necessarily so alien as to have and be a 50-foot squid thing and squirt telekinetic ink out, And they're kind of at the foot of the, everything's like white, and there's a white piano there, and the flat plane of glass to the ocean, right? And this, and he pushes something on his wrist, and the thing goes, and you can't see it anymore, just the outline of it hovering over the ocean. Prismatic, sort of triangular shape. And that sort of, this blip of imagery, and then we cut back to his flashbacks too, which contextualize maybe the Gray's actual archetypal affinity, and Roger, friendly and duplicitous, not necessarily, but the circus, left there, that scene, that blip in the sub sort of clip of imagery of the continuing tales of John Dee, but then literalized here, outside of that. Remember how it kind of flows in and out of that? So and he wakes up and so rather than a container, a statically, aberrantly synthetic and smooth structure between the redwoods, visually indicating the immediacy of, not normal. It's 918 also, and this is like sort of mainland, continental, future United States, right? So, not necessarily population dense. And so the Greys have taken him out into extra, terrestrial space, left him there. We didn't have context for that it was a win also. And so, but they travel in harmonic, right? Not necessarily, but we're speaking to that in, some things will artistic licenses, but the band, back to that 918, a sort of a literal wow, animism, Japan, China, dealing with the why of that, not just the that there is, there's four creatures and transmutagenic things, see the Miyazaki films, right? So 918, and so John Dee, this kind of out of time character, with the accessory accoutrement of this entity extraneously presented, and casually, but aiding, to an end, I guess, and so it becomes operantly motioned in time, I guess, at the behest of this extraneous entity, to fixative little things as can be in the unfortunate see Back to the Future, right? Under the sea dance while you don't fuck your mom, right? Humanity up to a point, right? So you get to experience kind of like that would be kind of the substance of the film is the fall, and maybe some sort of to incentivize the reason, ancient Chinese secret, right? He has to what could we go on? Oh, we go to Prague. We've been there. We've already been through all those places. But where do we need to go? So it's like no, it's not pre-dynastic, is it? When is it? 918. Huh. Look at the history books and the photo records and all that. I don't know. Probably loosey-goosey. Like you have 27 to, not necessarily, by the way, 27 to, 37 within the 0 to 100 band domain of Riemann zero mechanical sort of window of, the 20th century. Why is the matrix some of the archetypes good to a point, you know. That, and don't watch the rest of it because it's an induction channel of what false choice that leads you to a very complex sort of Jurassic Park style Malcolm and the Chinese scientist controlling the conversation of chaos, because you see the fusion of male female and the directors pointedly handshaking like Ben Affleck style, you know, and UK stuff going on with J.K. Rowling. See a parallel with that, you know. So let's go back to the story. You know, I was talking about the precursor of, you have one organism here in a X, you know, whatever, any number of dichotomous expressions, but mostly just two that reproduce together. And then, so, at the presence of machine intelligence in the observer domain, you have a 2012 statistics, a clean, you know, smush of the genders together, and then over the Darwinian ton, because Cambridge Analytica already existed, I promise you, right? So those numbers were already known. So it's an unnatural skew over Darwinian ton. And then handshake with also the same special interest intelligence, as if normal, right? So, anyways, but back in time, I guess dealing with the entity's literal presence, insofar as the Greys, it's more of a historical record inspection for maybe a specific thing that is found, you know, like the Holy Grail, because you can't necessarily interfere with anything, right? Because where did he come from? You know, all those people he's trying to save. So he fucks with that, regardless of it being an unnatural Darwinian and motion through the genetic and, you know, refraction and reactionary thing, you know, in long form time, that eventually attempts to reprint itself, right? In the interim period, many lives and families and whatever exists, so, you know, it's the undersea dance. But, so it's knowledge that he's after. Ancient Chinese secret. And so the first slide is you know, it's tongue-in-cheek to put that slide there. So the first slide is alien intervention. The Deus Ex Machina right at the beginning of Act 3 to get it out of the way, right? And because you wouldn't want to put it at the end of the other one. That's just kind of like sullen in reality, right? And it just leaving it there is to complain. You know, it's a kind of a complainer thing. Why complain about it, right? You know, there's technology there, but, you know, like I said, it's a suggestion of psycho-emotional, you know, because it's the backside of infinity, right? Trajectory, you know, not just some sort of science fiction and tech thing, because that, as we can see, what does this thing do? The transmutagenic parasymbiotic extraterrestrial slow roll, right? It's kind of like has a specific catabolization of technology progress vector that also has a condensation and crystallization of the genetic into a singular form. So technology is experienced regardless of the presence of this catalyst. That 918, keep in mind, you're already very highly evolved, you know, a Nordic something or other wandering around 918 Asiatic continent, Um, and so, we're witnessing, like, maybe the outfall of the first outbreak of whatever that looks like, probably like a Miyazaki film, right? But live action, um, and so what is he after? Well, he's after, as they kind of had the machine code for the backside of Infinity's, sort of front door, porch access, but not necessarily inside, right? That's kind of where the other thing, it's quadratically, like, see the equation, it's like the doorway opens, the necessity of, how many interference domains have you produced? Well, you produced more of a problem than you've soluted. Right? Welcome to physics. And then there's the other alien aircraft, right? So, he's after, what's already in the feed, and, in, the heart of darkness of the entrance of this thing, right? So it's like a heist from this alien, right? And it's to figure out, at the behest of, whomever's, and was hovering over the bed there, waiting for him to wake up from the flashback. And to specifically figure out where the ship came from extraneously, some record, and in the litany, all of this sort of physics and mathematical and metaphysical, allegorical data. It's assembled from the worlds it's whatever assimilated, but it hasn't. So there's always a bigger dog, right? And there they are, and the interaction is hands off because it's a non-domain bound it's it has already affected the timeline, and that's known to be the case. So it's informational. That's the desire's design to get, and the story is, it's the confirmation bias of the story is the solution to the story, and that's already been talked about in the long form time talk of Earth, right? So the experientiation is theater now, right? It's not the novelty of theater of walking out of Plato's cave. And it's best to do that in the theater and an actual movie called The Continuing Tales of John D. Episode, how many are there so far? What is it? 7? Let's call it 7. Who cares, right? The backside of Infinity.